Hi students, I had somebody contact me to ask me what is the difference between the project lifecycle and project processes. And so I decided to record this video so that everybody can get the answer to the question, because this is very important. Okay, so remember when we spoke about the product lifecycle in theme number 1, we said that this is a generic product lifecycle. So we do a need identification, which is phase 0. Phase 1 is the concept phase. Phase 2 is the design phase. Phase 3 is the development phase. Phase 4 is production. Phase 5 is operations. And phase 6 is disposal. So this is a generic product lifecycle. And then we said when we're talking about a project life cycle, we exclude production and operation. Okay, so I hope you all remember that. So this is the life cycle of the product of the project, and the project life cycle is basically phase 0 to phase 3, and then a project can start again in phase 6 when we do disposal. Right, so then if we move over to the process groups, look carefully over here. It says enter phase or start project. And this is the key to explaining the difference between the life cycle phases and the project management processes. So in essence, what happens is that in each phase, all of these processes will happen. So in order to, so if we go back to our product life cycle, let's say for example we are in phase 2, which is the design phase. If we are busy with the process groups, we will enter phase 2. So there will be something that will initiate phase 2. So when we talk about the initiation of a project, we talk about the project charter being drawn up, etc., etc. But here, if we talk about phase 2, which is the design phase, the output of the concept phase is going to serve as the initiation of the design phase. So at the end of phase 1, we have an approved concept, and that approved concept gives the team the go-ahead to expend company resources to do the design. Because remember that we normally initiate, do the initiation via a project charter, and all that the project charter is it is a document that authorizes the project manager to expend organizational resources on the project, and in this case on this phase, which is the design phase. Right, and then you can see that there are planning processes that happen. So before we can design or do the design of the project, so let's say that it's a house, and so before we can start doing the planning for the house and doing the architectural plans and purchasing the equipment and purchasing the materials, etc., we have to do a planning process. So for each of our phases, we might have a high level work breakdown structure at the start, but what this implies is that when we go into phase 2 and we are now busy doing phase 2, we will have a detailed planning process for that phase. Okay. Then of course we execute that plan, and the monitoring and controlling happens all the way from planning to execution, or rather from initiating to planning to executing and to closing. Right, and then we close the phase, and you can see there is exit phase or end project over here. So the difference is that the phases basically breaks down the product life cycle into manageable pieces, whereas the processes are the project management processes that we need to do in each phase. Okay, so there's some more examples to make it more or to try and make it clearer. So let's look at doing the need identification phase 1 and then the concept phase. So we enter the phase and start the project, and because this is the first phase, the project as a whole starts here. And we then initiate need identification, we plan it, we execute it, we close it, and of course monitoring and controlling is happening at the same time. Then we exit the need identification phase. So at the end of the need identification phase, we have certain documentation in place that tells us whether the need has been identified, etc., etc., etc. And we then hand over to the concept phase, or the concept phase then starts, which is the next phase of the project. And for the concept phase, we then have initiating, planning, executing, closing, and monitoring and controlling. And when all of that is done, we exit the phase. Right, so this is just to show you that the processes happen inside each of the phases. Okay, so if we look at specific projects, the first here are the project boundaries. So we start with a project initiator or sponsor. There are certain project inputs which are then used to initiate the project, and there are certain project deliverables and project records that need to be kept, which happen after the project boundary. Okay, and then this is where the project happens. But now if our project has more than one phase, this circle over here will be duplicated for each phase. Okay, so here is a simple example of the managing the installation of a telecommunications network. So this is a simple project, and we have decided to only use one phase. So this is the only phase that is going to be used. So we have initiating, planning, executing, and closing, and of course all of that is monitored and controlled, but that is for a single phase. Then if we have a project which is a little bit more complex, which is cleaning up a hazardous waste site, you will see that this project we have decided to break down into 3 phases. So facility decommissioning, waste removal and cleanup, and landscaping. And you can see that I've clearly indicated here that we have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So phase 1, facility decommissioning, we will initiate, we will plan on how we are going to decommission, what are the things that we need to decommission, what are the activities. So we set up our work breakdown structure, our Gantt chart, our network diagram, our scope statement, our project plan, basically for this phase. Then we execute that project plan, and then we close. So we then make sure that all our documentation is on file, that our lessons learned have been captured, that everybody involved in the facility decommissioning phase has been paid, etc., etc. Then we enter the next phase of the project, which is the waste removal and cleanup. So we initiate it, we give permission for the project team to start expending project resources on it. We plan how we are going to do the waste removal and cleanup. So we have a work breakdown structure, a scope statement, a network diagram, a Gantt chart, etc. And we then start executing that plan for phase 2. And then we close it, and of course monitoring and controlling happens throughout phase 2. Then at the end of phase 2, we then make sure that everything has been filed, we've learned the lessons, we've paid the people, We then go over to phase 3, which is the landscaping phase. We initiate, we plan, we execute, and we close. And again, the monitoring and controlling happens. So you can see that the difference between the life cycle and the processes is that the life cycle tells us the phases in which our project will be done, and in each phase the processes happen. So here is another one. This is a potential approach for building a new factory, and this is, again, we have phase 1, which is the design phase, and we have phase 2, which is the construction phase. And the difference in this project is that we are deciding to fast track. So we are saying that as soon as certain parts of the design are completed, we will then continue with the construction. So let's say we're building a building. So as soon as we have executed the foundations of the building, so the design of the foundations of the building, we then go over to construction of the foundation. And as we've discussed before in class, of course that has inherent risk in it, because it might be that we've missed something, and because we are overlapping the phases, it increases our risk. But so you can see that even here we have phase 1, and there are certain processes that have to happen in phase 1 before phase 1 is completed. But because we are fast tracking, we are overlapping the phases, so we don't have to complete all the processes in phase 1 before we start some of the processes in phase 2. Okay, so I hope that helps. If you have further questions on the difference between what a life cycle is and what the processes are, please send them through to me, and then I will try and answer them and make it available to all the students. Thank you.